B'ezrat Hashem, we'll try getting as much as we can done in the short amount of time that we have. It's officially the countdown has started since today was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So we have officially 2 weeks until the Seder. So we have to start bunkering down. Okay, so we left off last time, and this is probably one of the biggest questions people have nowadays, is with regards to purging of kitchen utensils. So if someone wishes that they want to use the same utensils as they use all year long for Pesach, then you would have to go ahead and purge the utensils so that no flavor of chametz is still in those vessels. We generally hold that anything that is cooked on a fire, or just anything in general that has hot food on it, has some layer, some form of bolea, it swallows the flavor, and so there's some flavor of that inside the vessels. So inside pots, pans, all of these things, even though you wash them, they're clean, they've been in the dishwasher, let's say, that doesn't take out the flavor that has been absorbed into them. And so because of that, we worry about how to go about using these vessels on Pesach. Of course, if someone doesn't want to use any vessels on Pesach, that's fine. Put all your vessels to the side, close them up, and you're good to go. The problem is that people sometimes, don't want to buy a whole new kitchen utensils, and so they want to go ahead and make sure that whatever they're using with regards to the pots and pans, that they're making sure that it is acceptable to use on Pesach. So the general rule is whatever way it is absorbed, whatever way that the general way of cooking with it is, that is how you would probably take out the flavor. So, for example, if you have a pot, right? And a pot usually you use on the fire with water, right? You usually put water or some kind of liquid inside the pot, maybe soup, whatever it is. It's on the fire. So the same way now you would have to go ahead and purge it by placing it inside a pot of water that's on the fire. So get a bigger pot, put it on a fire, and start boiling the water. Once it starts boiling, you put the pot into the bigger pot with water. That's called hagalah. Hagalah means that you put a pan or a pot or a utensil in boiling water that is still on the fire. And so that's considered hagalah. Now some utensils, as we'll see tonight, need libun. That's a different type. Those are going to be items that they are used exclusively on the fire. So for example, a barbecue grill, we'll see that that's a little more difficult to go ahead and kosher, but spits, those types of items that you place them straight on the fire, there's no medium of water, for example, that separates the cooked food from the fire. So those items would then have to be purged in a similar manner through a fire. So you would have to take like a blowtorch or get it very hot to the point where you start seeing sparks kind of go off on it. And so we'll go into more detail on specifics, but that's the general rule. The general rule is the same way that it was cooked. That's how you take out the flavor from it. So if it was cooked through a medium of water, then a medium of water will have to take that flavor out. If it was cooked through fire, meaning specifically straight onto the fire, then the way to take out the flavor would be straight through the fire. So I'll go through a long list of different items, and B'ezrat Hashem, if there's any other questions, if I forgot any or we didn't mention a common utensil that you use in the kitchen, please let me know. Okay, so another thing that we have to remember is that sometimes there are stains, rusts, right? And so sometimes the chametz can get into those pockets of rust. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing before making sure that you're doing any of these kashering processes, you want to make sure that you scrape at least all of those rust marks off, so that if it's a stain, that's fine, but you don't want it to be able to hide any chametz within it. Okay, bread baking pans. Okay, so bread baking pans, technically you would be able to kasher it through libun, meaning you blowtorch it or you make it hot enough to the point where sparks fly from them. Now the problem is most of our baking pans nowadays, if you do go ahead and try to do libun on that, it's probably going to get destroyed. It's probably going to get damaged, and so therefore the best bet is to go ahead and buy new ones. Similarly with cake pans, right? Cake pans, since there's depends on how much you oil up or grease the pan beforehand, but for most cakes, if they're made straight on a pan and there's not too much oil, well, at that point you're going to have to do libun again. If it is greased, if it's greased up, then you would be able to do hagalah, and there is a lenient opinion that says that you could go ahead and do that. Pastry pans, right? So again, flat copper-like pans that are used to make like thin crepes or whatever. So since the pans are lightly greased, to prevent the dough from burning, if someone wants to be lenient and do hagalah, they have a basis on to rely upon. But of course, you would rather do hagalah, libun, meaning putting it on the fire, blowtorching it. Of course, you want to make sure that there are no, you want to make sure that before you even do any of these things, you want to make sure that it's clean. There's no traces of chametz, there's no traces of bread on it. And so at that point, you're good to go. If someone wishes to kasher an electric oven, or any oven in general, right? So the ruling is like this: if you have a self-cleaning oven, usually you can put it on self-clean, and it'll get to a very high temperature. It'll get to like temperatures of close to 1,000 degrees, and you're good to go. That's all you have to do. You have to just put it into in self-cleaning mode, and you're good to go. That's the easiest method. As long as you have self-clean mode on the oven, put it on, you're good to go. If you don't have self-clean mode on the oven, then you would have to first go ahead and scrub the inner walls, make sure it's completely clean on the inside. Then after 24 hours from the last time you used it to cook anything that's chametz, then you put it on the highest temperature for at least an hour to burn. Okay? So if you have, again, self-cleaning, easier. Self-cleaning, you just put self-clean on, you're good to go. You can even at that point, you can even put grates. Let's say some of the burners here have grates on top, so you can take those grates on the stove, right? You can take those grates, put it into the oven, and that will be considered libun, right? So you can go ahead, take those grates that are on the oven, put it inside the oven, put it on self-clean mode, and you're good to go. For the self-clean, you would have to run the whole cycle, and so that's why it's so you don't have to do any other cleaning. You just put on self-clean, and it gets so hot there that it burns all of the traces of chametz, everything. And so that's the easiest method. Of course, not all ovens have that. So if your oven doesn't have it, then go ahead, make sure that it's completely washed, cleaned inside, and then wait 24 hours from the last time of use, and then put it on the highest temperature for at least an hour. Usually highest temperatures around 500 degrees. So that would be enough in order to go ahead and kasher them. The next question that we always get is microwaves, right? So microwaves in general, if you can be stringent and not use it or buy a new one, best method is that. But of course, it's sometimes more expensive, and sometimes we don't have the room to do so. So the other process is by making sure you clean it inside, clean it very well, and then you put a cup of soapy water in it, and you allow it to cook around for a couple of 5 minutes or so. Of course, it could not have been used in the past 24 hours. So you have to make sure, anytime we're talking about this kashering, we want a 24-hour period of no chametz use. So you put it you make sure it's all clean, there's no stains inside, you make sure it's all cleaned inside. Then you go ahead and you place a soapy cup inside, and let it go for around 5 minutes, and then you're good to go. That's the case, and most people don't cook inside the microwave. So that means we don't put raw food inside the microwave. If someone goes ahead and does put raw food inside the microwave, then you have no way of saving that microwave. You would have to put it onto the side until after Pesach. Can you put a pot in the oven while the oven is self-cleaning? Yeah, if you put a pot in the oven while it's self-cleaning, is also fine. I don't know if it's going to be good for the pot. It might destroy the pot. You would have to make sure that the pot can handle that, because I heard that it gets to temperatures up to 1,000 degrees while it's in self-clean. So you just want to make sure that I don't want to be telling you to put it in the pot and then you come out with a melted pot.
Maybe an iron skillet.
Yeah, an iron skillet out there, I would imagine it's good also. Okay, a convection microwave, usually that has a standard heating element, and it browns the food at the end of the cooking cycle. So that would be the same as a electric oven, any type of oven. Meaning, what you do is you go ahead. Again, I don't think there's any self-cleaning on these convection microwaves. Usually, what you would have to do is clean it inside very well. Make sure it hasn't been used in the past 24 hours. No traces of chametz. And then you would go ahead and put it on the highest level. Again, it's around 500 degrees, and for an hour, and you're good to go. Dishwashers, okay? So an electric dishwasher, as we know, that's used during the whole year, sometimes has chametz. Most of the time might have chametz in it, right? And it was used during the year with chametz, right? So nonetheless, you're allowed to use it. So you would first have to make sure that there's no, of course, residue of any chametz inside. So make sure it's cleaned, and then it's recommended that you wash a cycle without any dishes, using the highest water and, of course, strong washing fluids. There's some opinions that say that you should do it 3 times. That's stringent, but at least you do it 1 time, you're good to go. And as long as you cleaned it beforehand, and again, make sure that you haven't used it in 24 hours. Saucepans used to cook food over the fire must be purged by inserting them into a larger pot of boiling water, hagalah. Because a saucepan, again, is used, the medium of cooking is something liquidy, so you can go ahead and you can purge it through a liquid medium, meaning on a pot of boiling water. Again, we say that anything that is and we'll see this going into the more halachot, but anything that is usually boiled, usually on the fire itself, and is has a liquid in it, you would want to make sure that when you're placing it into the boiling pot of water, right, hagalah, you want to make sure that that pot is on the fire, right? And even it maybe got to a boil, and then you took it off, and then you put the vessel in. Not good. You want to put it back on the fire and put it into the boiling water. For the purposes of purging utensils, we will see that when we're saying it has to be from a boiling pot, right, it means that it has to be boiling, I say fire, but it could be an electric element as well. It's not necessarily fire. So if you're using a stove top, one of those electric stove top, that also is considered a water kettle, heating up a kettle. That would be considered boiling water, but as long as it's in the kettle, right, not outside of the kettle. A pressure cooker, right, that includes including the rubber gasket, can be purged through the process of hagalah. Once it has been thoroughly cleansed, hasn't been used in 24 hours, you're good to go ahead and use that for as long as you do hagalah on it, meaning putting it in boiling water. Can you flip it if the handle doesn't fit into the larger pot? So we'll see about that with regards to making sure that it's in. You can do the flipping, and so even if it doesn't fit into a larger, sometimes the pot is too big. So go ahead and do it in parts. You usually want to do it in halves. But you want to make sure that all of it has been hit with the water. Of course, like we said before, purging any of these vessels, you want to make sure that you scrub them, clean them, make sure that the handles and any places that chametz could enter is free of chametz. As we mentioned earlier, that you should remove the rust. Kitchen knives, right? Kitchen knives may be purged by immersing them into a pot of full water that was boiled on the fire. Now, with regards to kitchen knives, like we said earlier, that the only way that vessels swallow the taste of the chametz is when they're usually on a fire. So over here, when we're talking about kitchen knives, we're not talking about knives that you're using to cut your chicken or your vegetables while you're sitting at the table. We're talking more so on a knife that was used to like turn food over on the fire or to cut into like a steak that's on the grill, right? So those are the types of uses of such a knife. But we'll see later on, regular knives like spoons and forks that you use usually when you're sitting down to eat the meal, those are going to have a different deen. They're going to have a little bit more of a lenient kashering process. But in this case, when we're talking about kitchen knives over here, we're talking ones that were used specifically on the fire, or that I guess you used to stir a soup or for whatever reason, right? That were used in a process that was in a cooking process. After the fact, though, when you're eating, that's not considered cooking, and so they don't absorb as much taste as what we'll see. The iron tripods on the stovetops, right, or any iron on the stovetops, those would need some form of libun, right, especially if you spill chametz on it throughout the year or whatever it may be, and so you're going to make sure that those get properly heated up. Electric warming trays, for example, plata, right? So one may purge an electric warming tray through cleaning it thoroughly, removing all traces of chametz, and then pouring boiling water over it from a kettle that was boiled. So it's called iroi kli rishon. You will pour water from a kli rishon onto it, and you're good to go. Some people have the custom of wrapping it in tinfoil, and then if you want to be more stringent than that, you're good to go. Wrapping it in tinfoil, and you're good to go. A frying pan that usually uses oil. So since oil, even though you usually, let's say, put some kind of tortilla on it, right? But first you put the oil. So as long as you put oil beforehand, we consider that a medium of liquid, and then it can be done through hagalah, especially if it's a thicker oil. For example, let's say you do like a schnitzel, right? So since it's a lot of oil there, then it's not necessarily right on the fire. It's through a medium of schnitzel, and therefore hagalah is fine. If for whatever reason, when you're using the frying pan, you did not use it through a medium of oil, let's say you put the tortilla straight onto the frying pan without any oil, then it has to be done through libun. It has to be done through, which I don't think it'll withstand. I don't know if these frying pans can withstand those temperatures, but that's how you would have to go ahead and do it. As we'll see, there's a machlokit with regards to glass, with regards to Ashkenazim and Sephardim. So Sephardim, we generally say that with glass, you just have to rinse it off, clean it, and you're good to go. The Ashkenazim are more machmir, and they say you have to do hagalah on it, but you would have to be very careful, because if you do hagalah, then sometimes it can explode, especially since hagalah is not only just putting it into boiling water. Immediately after, you have to rinse it off with cold water. So you're going from hot to cold, and so it might burst, right? And so if someone has a custom that they go ahead and they do Pyrex and all those Duralex utensils, you want to make sure that they can withstand those temperatures and they don't burst. Of course, we don't want them to burst. We want everyone to be, safe while doing all of these. So if you have even a worry, go ahead, buy new ones. Hashem will worry about the payment, even though it's going to go to your credit card, but Hashem will take care of that later on. Don't worry. Now, so we said that all of this is with regards to utensils that were used in a kli rishon, meaning they were used straight on the fire, or they were used in a vessel that was straight on the fire, and so therefore the taste was able to permeate the vessel more, and so the taste of the chametz was able to go into the vessel more. But as we mentioned earlier, utensils that you use not while cooking, right, while you're eating, forks, knives, spoons, plates, all of those things, bowls, right, that you don't use straight on the fire, so those are called kli sheni. They're called a secondary vessel. And so the purging through them is also done through a kli sheni. So for example, if one uses, he has a serving bowl, right, and or he has a bowl where he puts the soup in, right? He doesn't cook the soup in the bowl. He just takes it from the pot on the fire and he puts it into his bowl. Similarly with the plates and spoons and all of these things, they can be purged by pouring boiling water from a kettle into a larger bowl and immersing them, or you can take it off the fire, whatever it may be. And we'll see that you can even put pour hot water onto them, and you're good to go. Because the permeability, the way that they swallowed the taste was to a lesser degree than if they were on the fire. So with regards to can you use a kosher dishwasher to clean the glasses? So again, it depends. If you're Ashkenazi, then that's not going to work. If you're Sephardi, then yeah, just cleaning it out, making sure there's no residue of chametz. Of course, you want to make sure that the dishwasher is also chametz free, because sometimes if there's chametz, it goes flying, and then what have you done? So you want to just make sure to make sure that those are all free of chametz and they are clean. And so with regards to a kli sheni, technically you could just rinse them off, but we're a little bit more machmir, and we do some sort of hagalah, but we don't do the traditional. If you want to go ahead and be machmir, if you just want to say, I don't want to deal with all of this, I'm just going to bring all of my utensils to one hot boiling water and put it in, you're good to go also. We're just saying, if you don't want to go and do that, you can also just take a boiling kettle of water, pour it on, and you're also good to go there. Similarly, all utensils that are used generally with cold foods or cold liquids, so technically you can just rinse them off. We don't, in Judaism, we say that cold does not absorb taste. It's usually hot foods. Hot makes the vessels absorb taste. Cold foods don't. Of course, you want to make sure that all these things we said tonight, you want to make sure 24 hours have passed since the last time there was any chametz on them. But if a person uses his vessels, namely only for cold items, for example, let's say he has wine glasses, right? So those are only going to be used for or wine cups, right? Not glasses, right? But wine cups, right? So those are always going to be used for chilled or cold beverages. So in that sense, then you only have to go ahead and rinse it off. We're a little bit more machmir, and we go ahead and try to do something a little bit more machmir. We pour hot water on it, but nonetheless, since it has only been used for cold water, then you're good to go with just washing it off technically. And even if they were occasionally used with hot bread, it's sufficient that the majority of times that they were used was with cold food. And of course, again, this applies only if 24 hours have passed since the last time that it was used with hot chametz. But if such a utensil had been used with hot chametz within the previous 24 hours, you should be stringent, and you should go ahead and do hagalah, or one of the more stringent ways of kashering it. Refrigerators and freezers, right? So those just need to be thoroughly cleansed. You don't have to go ahead and wrap it with tin foil. So even though some people do that, but you don't have to do it. All right. Someone said to me, I always thought that Pesach was coming out of Mitzrayim. I didn't know we were going all the way to space, because everything always looks like outer space when Pesach. Everything's all silvery. They put all the tinfoil everywhere. Fine. But refrigerators and freezers, minikar adin, you can just go ahead, clean them, and you're good to go. Earthenware vessels were a little bit more machmir, or more stringent, and since usually one cannot purge a earthenware vessel that has absorbed that chametz taste in it, then therefore we say that you cannot use those items on Pesach. There's no way of purging them. We usually say the way of purging vessels, earthenware vessels, is destroying them. No one's going to go ahead and destroy them, so you shouldn't use them. Even if there was a one-time use, our sages forbade it because the absorption of earthenware is a little bit more stringent, and we don't use it. If the earthenware vessels have been used for cold, only used for cold, then there is a method. That there is a method for whatever it needs to be. So, for example, let's say porcelain utensils which are also considered earthenware. If they were used with hot chametz, they also cannot be purged through hagalah. But if it was through cold, right? If it's cold, if it was cold food or drinks or whatever, then you can go ahead and use hagalah on these vessels. Kitchen sinks and countertops, right? So that's the next big one. So kitchen sinks, usually someone, when they do dishes, it gets to a little bit of a boiling temperature. It gets a little hotter there, and so it could be that the surfaces of the sink, they usually can get to a point where they might have absorbed any taste. So the best thing to do is to go ahead and pour boiling water over the surfaces 3 times, and then it may be kasher for Pesach. When we say pour the boiling water on it 3 times, you want to make sure that each time you pour the boiling water on it, it's dry. Because if you don't dry it out, then you're not pouring it on this kitchen sink, you're pouring it on the water that's on the kitchen sink. And so you need to make sure that when you're pouring out of the boiling water, and we'll see that also with the countertops, okay? Also countertops, right? Countertops also, meikaradin, you can go ahead and marble kitchen countertops, right? And other types of marble countertops, right? You can go ahead and you can pour hot water on them. The Darkei Moshe points out, and this is how the halacha is, that you should make sure that while you're pouring out the hot water, only what the stream touches is kasher for Pesach. So whenever you're going ahead and you're doing it, you can't just pour it in one spot and then like squeegee it everywhere and say, okay, I've purged the whole countertop or the whole sink. No, it doesn't work like that. You need to make sure there's a continual stream. And one thing to note is that when there's going to be those last couple drops that they leave from the kettle, that they've detached themselves from the kettle. At that point, those spots, that last whatever amount that detached, it was mid-air, right? It has nothing connecting to it. That would not be considered part of the stream, and you would need to make sure that is at least on the same area where you ended off. So that last part of the stream, it would not be good for kashering. So you want to make sure that when you're going ahead and you're kashering these countertops or these sinks, and you're being somech, you're relying on this pouring of the boiling water, you want to make sure that you're pouring it such that it's a continual stream. Once there's no more stream in it, then just remember that's the spot, and then you want to continue from there. Okay. Again, when both with the sink and with the kitchen, with the countertops, you want to make sure that you're pouring it onto a dry surface. Because if you're pouring it onto a wet surface, then you're not putting it on. You're pouring it onto the surface. You're pouring it onto the water that's on the surface. The best way to catch all the boiling water or to keep it from going between things that can't be reached, I don't know. Set up squeegees. I don't know. I guess a lot of towels. The best way to do it, though, they say, is someone who wishes to purge both their kitchen counter and their sinks at the same time. You should first pour the boiling water into the sink. First purge the sink, and then afterwards pour more onto the countertop. So I guess do the sink, and then I guess if you have a big enough kettle, go ahead and do the countertop. That way, you're utilizing the kettle. I guess that's the best way. But nonetheless, what you want to just keep in mind that while you're doing this is that you're making sure you're pouring onto a dry surface. If you have that in mind, then you're good to go. Utensils made of wood, stone, or bone, they're similar to metal utensils in that they have to be purged of any forbidden flavor. And just as we mentioned with regards to metal utensils, same process. If they're used on the fire, then they would need libun, which usually doesn't. If you're using a wood utensil, I doubt that anything will last after putting it on a fire like that. If they're used in the boiling pot, you have those wooden spoons that you use for like pasta or something. So you need to purge those again into a kli rishon, a hagalah. You have to purge those into a water on the pot. As we mentioned that, before that, plastic utensils, right? Plastics, they can be purged in the preparation of the same, similar to metals and plastics and wood and all of these things. That the same way that they were used is the same way that they need to be kashered. So sometimes those plastics cannot handle those heats; they will deform. For sure, libun, but also sometimes hagalah. So then just go ahead and buy new ones. That's always the best bet. Glass utensils that we mentioned, there's a machloket. So the Ashkenazim have the custom to treat the glass utensils like earthenware, and so they refrain from purging them. They hold that it's technically would be permissible to even Ashkenazi may use glass utensils after they were purged through hagalah, and especially if they've done it 3 times. But again, since it's delicate in nature, and the glasses sometimes can break, so they are more stringent in that they don't use glass. Us Sefardis, clean it, wash it off, you're good to go. Dining room table, right? So if you eat directly onto the dining room table, then it's a similar case like the countertops. So there's no difference. If you eat 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time, on a tablecloth, you don't just have to make sure it's clean. There's no chametz, then you're good to go. You don't have to pour boiling water. Tablecloth, all you have to do is put that into a laundry of hot water, and you're good to go. A coffee mill does not need to be purged at all if it was used only for coffee throughout the year. Of course, if there was any chametz that was used in it, then you would have to go ahead and make sure that those are what's it called, that they're kashered accordingly. You have to make sure that while you're doing this, you should have in mind, or you should have someone at least. Usually they have places in the in synagogues and places where they'll come and do it. Have people have a mashkichim watching over you. That's the best method. I would say don't rely on yourself. If you have a question, ask. If you want to know if you're doing it correctly, take a video, send it to our rabbi, and see if they say that it's good. All right. So that's the best. That's the best method. Especially that have rubber handles. So rubber handles, if they're able to withstand the temperatures of libun or usually, I don't know, usually if something has a rubber handle, you're not really going to be doing libun on it. You're probably going to be doing hagalah on it. You're probably putting it into a pot of boiling water. I don't think that will mess up the rubber handles. I might be wrong, but that would be the best way to go ahead and purge those pots. Other items that are usually used, baby bottles, right? Sometimes plastic. If it's plastic, then the top, the nipple of the bottle just needs to be cleaned thoroughly. Put it into boiling water, and the same goes with the bottle itself. If the bottle, of course, is glass and you're Sephardi, then you just have to clean it and you're good to go. Barbecues, right? Barbecue, you should get a new grill. Technically, again, you would be able to do libun. You have to wash it, clean it very well, and then you do libun. But it's gonna destroy the grill, and it's also gonna destroy. You might not have been able to take out all the chametz. So best bet is it's recommended to go ahead and buy a new grate. Right? You don't have to buy a whole new grill, just a new grate, because otherwise that might destroy the grate. Birkat Hamazon cards, right? Everyone has those like benchers throughout the year. So those tend to have traces of chametz, so go ahead, clean them. You just have to wash them off. You don't have to put them in boiling hot water. I mean, that will probably destroy the cards. Just make sure that there's no traces of chametz. If you go ahead and buy ones exclusively for Pesach, Hashem will bless you for that. A blender, right? The motor housing, where you just put the blender on, right? Or you just kind of screw it on. So that just has to be cleansed thoroughly. Make sure that there's no residues of chametz. The blender itself, if it was used for hot chametz, then you would have to purge it through hagalah. You would have to purge it through putting it on into a pot of boiling water. Similarly for the knives, right? The spinner. If it was only used, for example, for smoothies, right? For example, cold items, then technically you can just wash it off or pour hot water on it, and you're good to go because it never got hot. As long as it doesn't get hot, we're good to go. And so that's if it's of course glass, then even more so. Even if it was hot, you can just Sephardi's go ahead and clean them off. Bottle openers, all right, those need to only be cleansed and rinsed, and nothing too crazy about that. Bowls, right? We said bowls also, if they're used, as long as they're used for cold foods, then you can just clean them off. If they're used for hotter foods, then you can do it in a klisheni, pour hot water on them, or put them in a boiling pot of water. That's for sure, a boiling pot of water. But even putting it into a klisheni. Chairs, right? You want to make sure that the chairs are cleansed of chametz. Sometimes they fall into the crack, between the backrest and the actual seat part. So you want to make sure that those areas are cleansed of chametz as much as possible. If someone buys specific chairs for Pesach, then he will also be blessed. Don't worry. Can openers need only to be cleaned and rinsed thoroughly. Even though they have circular blades that bite into the top of the cans, as it turns, right? It can be difficult to clean. If you use it for chametz products, or there's some traces of chametz, then it's recommended to go ahead and buy a new one for Pesach. A crock pot, since the pot is earthenware, all right, so it cannot be purged at all, and so crock pots, you'd have to buy a new one for Pesach. Decorations, right? If someone has like a sealed bottle of wheat kernels or a whiskey, right, or like a blue label, right, and so all of those things are solely for decorative purposes. They should be sold to the non-Jew with the rest of your chametz. You can't leave it there. You'd have to go ahead and put it with the rest of your chametz. A cutting board, right? Cutting board, if it's made of wood, can be used for Pesach after sanding it down. Since its surface has some traces of chametz, so you'd have to kind of sand it down. If it's made out of plastic, you can't sand it down. It's not going to work. So you'd have to buy a new one. And if it's made from glass, right, then you're good to go. It only needs to be rinsed well. Dentures, right? So people have retainers, dentures, right? Those just need to be cleaned thoroughly. Make sure that there's no visible traces of chametz, and there's no further purging. If you want to be stringent, you can pour boiling water from a kettle onto them, and you're good to go. The dish drainers, the things that catch the chametz, it's recommended to buy a new one. Those probably should be thrown away, especially since you pour boiling water and it catches some chametz. Best thing to do with those is to go ahead and throw it away, get new ones, especially since it's pretty cheap. You should go ahead and do that. Dustpans, right? They should be cleaned thoroughly. Vacuums too. Make sure that you clean them so there's no traces of chametz. I mentioned that. A flower vase should be rinsed and cleaned. I don't know if you've ever had chametz in your flower vase, but if you did, you should go ahead and do that. A garlic press, right? The things that you press to make the garlic, those need to be cleaned and rinsed. especially if you only use them for garlic. Garbage cans, make sure to clean and rinse them as well. Even though we don't really have, we usually have the garbage can usually has the garbage paper, whatever what do you call them? The garbage bag, garbage bag. Nonetheless, sometimes things do fall into the garbage can itself, so you want to make sure that those are cleaned. A grater, right? If it never grates chametz products, it needs only to be cleaned well. If it is used for chametz products or with chametz products, it technically is permissible to use on Pesach after cleaning it well and making sure that there's no chametz between those knives, right, in the actual grate. But of course, it's best to burn out those areas with a fire, or to, of course, buy a new one. A kettle, right, or an electric warming water, right? It has to be purged through hagalah. This is if sometimes bread was placed on top of it, because some kind of chametz food touched the sides, right? At that point, we already say the taste gets into the utensil. If one knows for sure that there was no chametz product to touch it, then you can just make sure to clean it down. But you want to make sure that those are set aside if that's the case. Yeah.
So if it's so let's say like an electric kettle.
Yeah.
Comments touch the side of it, but if you like submerge it in water, it'll be ruined because it's electronic, like the connector.
Correct.
Or whatever would be ruined. What do you do for that?
So you'd have to buy a new one. So because you have to purge it. You're gonna have to purge it, and so the only way you can purge right is you can't purge it. So you're gonna have to go ahead and buy a new one. Mixers, like an electric mixer, they should refrain from using it on Pesach, especially if it's touched dough, right? And probably use dough in that mixer or some kind of dough, some type of chametz. So it would be recommended to not use it on Pesach. Pot covers also must be cleaned and purged through hagalah, not just the pot itself. So just remember that the pot covers also. I think we mentioned most of this. A potato masher, right, must be cleaned through thoroughly in each of its spaces, and then it must be purged through hagalah. So that one you're gonna have to go ahead and purge through hagalah. A rolling pin, again, that's recommended to just put it to the side, get a new one for Pesach. Most people aren't making any bread on Pesach, so depends what you're going to be using that rolling pin for. A schnitzel hammer, those hammers that kind of make the schnitzel thin. So you don't really use it when it's breaded. You use it more so just on the chicken itself. Those only need to be cleaned well, and just make again sure that there's nothing in those tiny crevices, and you're good to go. A soup ladle, right? A soup ladle will be the same din as the soup itself, and so you'd have to purge it through hagalah. It's people sometimes forget, but the jewelry, right, rings, it's important to clean those thoroughly, since they collect dirt and sometimes have traces of chametz on them, especially when they eat, you have a sandwich or a pizza, and it gets into between the ring, and they never know. So go ahead and make sure that is also cleaned. Salt shakers, right? Those need to be cleaned well. It's usually recommended to just have a Pesach one. Stove grates, we said that it's best to go ahead and do libun on them. That would be the best method to clean those. There are some stovetops that are glass stovetops. So if you're Sephardi, then glass stovetops, again, it's easy because glass doesn't absorb. If you're Ashkenazi, so it gets a little bit more complicated, and you have to go ahead and kind of surface it with more tin foil, cut out little holes, and make sure your house looks a little bit more shiny for Pesach. Make sure that your telephones, right? Telephones, if you have cases, you want to make sure that you take off the cases. Make sure there's no traces of chametz within the telephones. That's something that we use most of the time. That's on our tables, and we sometimes forget about them. And so just make sure that you're thoroughly, again, you don't have to purge your telephone. You don't have to put it into a bowl of hot water, but just open the case, make sure that you're cleaning it well, and so that there's no traces of chametz. A vegetable peeler, right, needs only to be cleaned well and rinsed, and you're good to go. Vinyl tablecloth, right, as long as it is not torn and is free of holes, it can be purged by pouring boiling water on it, just like a countertop, because I don't know if you can really go ahead and wash them in a washing machine. So the best thing to do would be pouring hot water on it. Now, of course, if you're a water kettle, right? We mentioned the water kettle. If it didn't touch chametz, like we said earlier, and you know it's good to go, right? So there's a lot of machloket on that, and the more lenient opinion is that you just have to clean it, make sure that there's no chametz on it, and you're good to go. But several poskim are more stringent, and they said that it actually is necessary to purge the kettle by filling it up to the top with boiling water and letting it overflow to the sides. So that's the more stringent, especially if sometimes it's necessary to remove all the calcium buildup inside the utensil. It looks a little grainy, and they have all of those. They have some chemicals that you can go ahead and dissolve the deposits. Of course, this is only if there was no chametz that was cooked on it or warmed on it. At that point, though, you would have to go ahead and put it to the side and get a new one. Of course, anyone who goes ahead and buys a water kettle specifically for Pesach, they will be rewarded. Okay, so, and all of this has to be done, remember, before the time that chametz is forbidden. So I want to make sure that we're doing all of this before Wednesday, April 1st, and before, I think we said 12:15 over here, which is the 5th hour when chametz becomes forbidden, and you want to make sure that that's all done. The custom of the Sephardi is to so silicone. I think silicone utensils is the same as all the other metal utensils that we've covered tonight. With regards to rice and legumes, right? Legumes. The custom of the Sephardi descent is that they're permissible. You have to, of course, check them to make sure that there are no grains, wheat kernels or barley kernels mixed in with them. As long as you inspect all of the rice, you're good to go. There are, of course, people that are more machmir even in the Sephardic circles, and so you can't make fun of them, and especially the Ashkenazim who have a good tradition, a fine minhag to not do it. So we respect them, and they don't eat rice or legumes. Nonetheless, if a Ashkenazic Jew is invited to a Sephardic Jew's house, he may eat from the pots and pans that were used to cook rice and legumes. They can't eat from the rice and legumes, right? That's not kosher for Pesach for them, but they're allowed to eat from the same pots and pans that were maybe used to cook these rice and legumes. So you don't have to worry. They don't have to go ahead and kasher their utensils after making rice. We'll talk more about this, I think, next time, that especially as we're getting closer to Pesach, that this year is unique, and that this year we're going to have to do Eruv Tavshinin in order so that we can cook on Friday for Shabbat. If someone wants to cook on Friday for Shabbat, then they're going to have to do an Eruv Tavshinin, and you're allowed to, for example, make rice on if you eat rice, even if in your Ashkenazi, right? And I guess this year it's not going to be falling out after Shabbat, but if, for example, the last day of Pesach was Friday, then an Ashkenazi would be able to go ahead and cook rice for Shabbat for the next day. Of course, we're going to talk about this more next time, but That's within Eruv Tavshinin. We'll talk more about that, so just leave that in the back of your mind, and we'll talk about that next week. For the Seder, you want to make sure that you're buying matzah Shmura, right? So there's two types of matzah that's out there. There's kind of more of the machine-made square matzahs, right? And so that's good. That's technically it's fine to eat. It's kosher for Pesach, as long as there's a kosher. I saw one time they had these kosher for box. They had boxes of matzah, and it says on the bottom, not kosher for Pesach. And I said, oh, that's the perfect thing not to do, right? So you want to make sure that whatever matzah you're buying, don't assume that it's kosher for Pesach. Make sure that it says kosher for Pesach. That's number one. Number two is that when you're going ahead and you're buying matzot, so there's two types of matzot you'll see. You'll see one like that's circular and then one that's square, generally. Generally, the square ones is not shmura. Shmura means not guarded, meaning the whole process wasn't guarded, and it's best not to go ahead and use that for the Seder night. It would be best to use the circular ones, the shmura matzahs. That's the best way of doing it. If you cannot attain it, then you can go ahead and do the Seder with the square ones. But again, the best way, the most official way to do the Seder is with those Shmura matzahs, because they're it's like a hidur mitzvah. It's embellishing, making the mitzvah greater, specifically again through those Shmura matzah. And so that's ideally, if you want to go ahead and eat the square matzahs after you eat the Shmura matzahs, that's fine. But again, you want to make sure that that's the main staple of the night. So the I get out of here. Yeah. Okay. So there are food products and fruits that one may be kept over Pesach. So with nowadays with dried fruits, you have to be careful, right? Because the dried fruits, they put a lot of sometimes chametz on them. So nowadays I would be more so to be stringent on that. But sugar, for example, sugar is permissible for Pesach use. Anyone who has a custom from refraining from eating sugar on Pesach and thought that it was forbidden for whatever reason, in that case you can completely discontinue it and go ahead and eat sugar. There's no reason to think that that sugar is not kosher for Pesach, even if it didn't say specifically kosher for Pesach, unless they're putting some chametz in it. I don't know. Maybe they're putting chametz in it nowadays. I don't know. But for last I heard, sugar is good to go. Similarly, salt, right? Salt may be used for Pesach, even if it has no specific kashrut, no special certification for kosher for Pesach use. If one purchases a closed sack of salt or a closed box, is good to go. Similarly, coffee, right? Pure coffee. We're talking no flavors, no additives, just 100% coffee. Then you're good to go. It's permissible to drink coffee on Pesach. Now you want to make sure though, if it is a flavored coffee, then you would have to make sure that's on the list. Most of the time it's not. So just double check that. But 100% ground coffee beans, you're good to go.
Unground coffee beans, but it's been opened before Pesach. So like nothing else goes in there. Like you could have a special oven for it. Like nothing else.
So if it's unground coffee beans, then as long as nothing's has touched it and there's no chametz in the bag, then it's good to go. It's like anything else that has been used solely for that item. All right. For example, like salt or sugar, all right, that you don't have, that you have, unless you just need to make sure that when you're saying that there's no chametz that has ever been in there, and you have to make sure that there's no chametz that was ever in there, right? Because again, we're saying that on Pesach, even one crumb can invalidate a large box of food.
Yeah, sometimes like I use the same scooper sometimes that I get.
Yeah.
Like my scoopers are interchanged.
Yeah.
Things.
So your spoon, scoopers, right, or whatever you're using, right, you want to make sure that, of of course, that hasn't touched chametz or doesn't have any traces of chametz. That's why it's when you're playing with, it's like you're playing with fire here. The best thing to do is just buy a new bag of coffee beans, buy a new bag of sugar, buy a new bag of salt, and you're good to go. That would be the best bet. There is a custom that on now we're getting into the 14th, right? We have 2 weeks, so less than 2 weeks. So we have a custom to forbid labor once the afternoon of the 14th has reached. So April 1st, in the afternoon time, it's forbidden to engage in any acts of labor. Of course, if someone is in dire need, it's going to harm their business, there are reasons to be lenient. But at this time, in the afternoon time, during the times of the Beit HaMikdash, this was when they would go ahead and offer the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. And so as a commemorative event, we stop working already from the afternoon of Pesach. On those years, not this year, but on those years when the 14th is Shabbat, right? Last year it was like that, where the 14th of Nisan was Shabbat, and then Pesach was Motzei Shabbat. Then there's no reason to forbid labor on the 13th. Even though we say, and so even instructing a non-Jew to perform an act of labor for a Jew is also forbidden. Generally on Shabbat, Yom Tov, and Chol HaMoed, right? But over here on the 14th, on the afternoon of the 14th, it's permissible. You don't have to be extra stringent in that regard. Haircuts, right? Technically, it's forbidden to get one's haircut on the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan. If one mistakenly forgot to have their haircut before noon, he may cut his hair in the afternoon, but no one may charge him, and no one should initially go into the day thinking that he should go get his haircut in the afternoon. Of course, if the barber is poor and you're actually helping him with parnasa and you're helping him with his funds, then it's good. You can go ahead and allow him to do that. And of course, if he's a non-Jewish barber, there's no issue with that. You want to make sure though that you are shaving. Men specifically should get haircuts and before Pesach, because once Pesach starts, the Omer starts, which we'll talk about also after soon. And during the whole 33 from Sephardi 34 days of the Omer, we do not get haircuts, or shave. So that's they have no shave November, so we have no shave Omer. So we have to go ahead, no cutting hairs and no shaving. So you want to make sure you do all of that before Pesach starts. Trimming your fingernails is also a good minhag. You should also do that. So you should go ahead and do that. And again, you can do that even in the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan. You should go ahead and shine. You can shine your shoes. You can take photographs. All of these things are even starting an electric washing machine mid-cycle. You can You can do that during the 14th, even if it continues after midday. We'll talk B'ezrat Hashem next week more about the 14th of Nisan. It has a little bit more halachot, and then we'll get into the Seder next week. I know we're running out of time, but B'ezrat Hashem, I think next week we'll be able to get a lot of the halachot of the Seder done, and then we'll also have to talk about Eruv Tavshinin, since this year the second day of Pesach falls on a Friday, and so if you want to cook anything, you would have to do an Eruv Tavshinin in order to cook anything on Friday for Shabbat. That's only if you want to cook something on Friday for Shabbat. If you don't want to, you don't have to, and we'll talk more about that, B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully close to the end of next week. Okay, I will open it up for questions. If